The talk of the town. Life stories from the people who lived them. The story of Vera Thompson.
I was born in Preston on the 28th of 2nd, 1921. That makes me now 87. The house that I was born in, it wasn't a house as such. It was a hovel. There was nothing else for it. For a sink, it was like a stone bath. There was rickety shelves around the wall to hang cups and plates, no such thing as a... There was one gas lamp in the room that we lived in. All the other rooms were candles. But I had a wonderful mother and father. They were happy living out as they lived like that. My father was wounded in the war and he lost a leg. He only had one leg. And a little tiny stump for his other leg where they just sort of knitted it together, not like they were doing today, where they pulled the skin over and that. And it was constantly running, needed attention. And that was when he was 21, when that happened in France. My dad had to go to Liverpool to get the first, well, not that I don't remember the first, but when I remember them, the legs, they were heavy, wooden. The bucket that you to put your stump in, it was heavy leather. But how they carried them around them, I don't know, with these little bits of stumps. They had braces and what have you, but it was horrible. But he had to go to Liverpool and we had to go through Chinatown to get to this place that made these false things. I can remember now the smell of it. All these chinks were sat on stools and on the floor and that. Queer-looking men, queer-looking women, and they'd be smoking. Probably pot, I don't know, but it was a horrible smell and a horrible look, and I'm like this. You can imagine a little 8, 9-year-old holding me dad's hand, and my dad had his stick in his leg. Oh, God. Things that stick in your mind, if I see Chinese now, I can smell this smell that came when we were walking through it. But so life was a bit limited. He couldn't get about as he wanted to, but he was happy as he was, and he worked as a shoemaker. I forget the name of the place now, but it was in where Kent Street is in Preston. And they just made shoes. He was what they call a finisher. When the shoes had been made, he polished the soles and what have you, and that was his job. My mum stayed at home, and I was the only child for 10 years. I was the only child for them. I was the only grandchild. I was the only niece for 8 siblings belonging to my mum's family. My father's family was a bit to one side. We never had a lot to do with them. Because my father was born when my grandma was 49. So she was an old lady in those days. So we didn't have an awful lot to do with them, but my mum's family, my grandmother was an angel. She died when she was 54. My granddad was a brewer and a drunkard. But as I said, they had 8 children, but 2 died. I really don't know what with. In the yard of the house, we hadn't a toilet as such. It was a tippler, what they called a tippler. And it was just a piece of wood with a hole in, and then like a long pipe. And I can remember being absolutely petrified in case I fell down this pipe. I used to watch my dad cutting newspapers in squares, putting string through, and that was the toilet paper, no such things as Andrex or anything like that. We shared that with next door people, there was a mother, father and 2 sons, and their house was 1 room, just 1 room, full stop. I don't know how they existed, but they shared the toilet with us, and it was who could get first to that toilet in the morning. Because the man, his name was Marley, I don't know what that was for. He used to take his paper as well. He didn't think of anybody else wanting to go. And then the house the other way, there was just a lady on her own, and she, as another story, committed suicide. But those 3 houses were belonging to a lady in Walton-le-Dale. My mum used to collect the rent for them and take them to Walton-le-Dale to this lady. Our house was 2 and 6 a week rent. The 1 room was, I think that was 1 shilling. I won't be sure about that. And the other one was a bigger house with a then called parlour, and then the living room and the kitchen. The 1-roomed house had 2 bedrooms. We had 3, and the other house had 3, and that was it. That was virtually it, you know. Why my mother had 2 milkmen, I do not know. But she had 2 milkmen. One was a dour farmer. And I can't remember him smiling. He used to come with the, what they call them, urns, and a really hygienic thing, you know, for a Jill. And the other one was a man called Hitchin, and he was 20-odd stone. He was absolutely massive. But I told you about at the beginning about this gate. It had a courtesy thing, just a little gate that you got through. And then to get, if you wanted it wide, the middle part opened, and that, you know, that was really wide. Grand for drying clothes for my mum, you know, it was. But I remember one morning when Tom Hitchin came, and the girl that used to come with him wasn't there for some reason or other. And he was trying to get in, and he was trying to get through the gate, courtesy gate, and he got stuck. And he was shouting for my mum, "Annie, come and help me," and she had to go on propitious fat through, you know, to get it. There's all sorts of funny things like that. That was it. I stayed there till I was 10, but it was a happy childhood, you know. It was happy. Then my brother came along, and that spoilt everything. Money wasn't, well, it was a problem really, but I sometimes wonder now how my mum managed on what she had, you know. But she always used to reckon if she had 5 shillings on the Monday, which was a heck of a lot of money, that would see us through the week. Not when I was little, obviously, but when I got older, she used to, on this 5 bob, she used to take me to, on a Wednesday afternoon, Tokyo Cafe in town, and she bought 1 toasted tea cake and a pot of tea for 1. Well, she had the pot of tea and I had drinks out of it, and she cut the tea cake in 2. It was probably something and nothing, maybe 6pence, 7pence, but that was a treat, you know. I remember when I was 3, my mum's youngest sister, Winnie, I followed her everywhere because there was not a lot of difference between us, really. I'm talking 5, 6 years, you know. And when I was 3, I apparently followed her to school, and it was down Meadow Street then, near the infirmary. And I went in there, and she went to it was a Catholic school. She went to the nun and said, "Vera's followed me to school, what have I to do?" "Oh, leave her here, and mother will find her missing and she'll come, somebody will know, have seen her, what have you." You know, very caring people. And they put me in the starting class, the 3-year-olds. And Miss Martin, her name was, she was a little person, her hair screwed back in a bun, pointed. "Sit down." Well, I wasn't used to that. "I don't want to." She said, "You sit down," so I sat down. And I can remember it as plain as anything. She put a slate in front of me, threw some sand on it, coloured sandy stuff it was, and had to draw things. About an hour after, my mother came rushing in all hot and sweating and what have you. And I wouldn't go home with us. I wanted to stay, and I started school then. That was it, every day after. And when he took me to school and I sat with Miss Martin's class, that was that. And I just grew up and did things that we did then, nothing like they do now when they're growing up, with friends. Walking around streets, big potato, looking for matches that men had thrown away, making hedgehogs. That's all we did. Played what we called alleys. We used to have suckers, rubber things that were in a piece of string, and we used to wet them, put them on a cobblestone, and lift this cobblestone up, and there was this hole. We used to play alleys, nigging them in, marbles, whatever, glass marble, then put thing back and stand on it. Something that would never, ever, ever happen today. Stop men in the street and say, have you got any cigarette cards? Yeah, they don't, they fight. And they used to collect sets of them. Oh, dozens and dozens of sets of cigarette cards, things like that. Sunday it was, we used to go to church in the morning. I had to go to Sunday school in the afternoon. And then my mum and my dad and myself used to go to church at night for what was benediction. And coming home, we used to stop at a shop, get a bag of parched peas and take them home. And then we'd play dominoes or cards with these parched peas, and that was our Sunday, But, we were church-going, well, my mum was church-going people. I'm thinking, really, it was shoved down our throats so much. You turn against it eventually. Oh, yes. Definitely. I'm saying, oh, yes, definitely. Apparently my grandma was a convert, but she was a better Catholic than some of the Catholics that were born Catholics. Going to another part of my life, I was into convent. My mum sent me for piano lessons when I was 5. At 6, I passed my first piano exam, which was in the Park Hotel. This music teacher took me there. Walking along these corridors, I thought I was in Buckingham Palace. We get in this big room, and there's this fella, shock of white hair, this baby grand piano there, and I'm looking at him, and he said, well, come on, get on the stool. I said, I can't, I'm too little. So he had, it was Madam Haywood, and she was in the room. She was not now using her ornament. He said, oh, if you're too little, I'll have to lift you up, and he lifted me up and plunked me on this chair. That was the beginning of my musical career. I went in for exams, theory, practical, until I was 14. And I was studying. I'd gone from Madam Haywood to this, Jack Whittaker, his name was. He eventually went to be a vicar. He was a farmer, really. Do you know where Courthouse is? Well, that was his farm, well, his dad's farm. But he did this music teaching, and he got me through. It was one exam before I got my cap and gown for London Royal College. And there was that. She took me to dancing lessons. I did that as well. But when I was 14, I started with appendicitis. I was at school, I was at the convent. I was going in to be a gym mistress. That was the aim, that's all I wanted ever to do. I played netball when I was at ordinary school. I passed my town exam that you had to pass before you got to convent. Well, it wasn't, you had to pass that, and then you had to take your scholarship exam to get to wherever you wanted to go, either park, school or convent or whatever you. And so I was going in for being a gym mistress. Well, this appendicitis started. We fiddled about with it that long. It was just a pain. It was just when you've been running a stitch, and it was things like that. Well, we left it too long and it burst. And I was in Royal Preston. I went in at the Easter and I came out, it was the end of August. I got blood poisoning. So that it did everything that it shouldn't have done. It stopped me going in to be a gym mistress because I just couldn't do what I had to do. I'd already learnt nearly 1,000 scales, arpeggios, all job lot and that, and I was adamant I wouldn't go through that, so I didn't go for my cap and gown. In hindsight, I was just stupid, but you're young and you think you know everything, don't you? So my career just went haywire then. So my mum said, well, what do you want to do? I fiddled about at school, but at convent, but I wasn't happy doing anything, because I couldn't do gym. And I left at 16, and my mum said, what do you want to do? I said, I'll go hairdressing. Well, if that's what you want to do, you'll have to do. Well, she'd paid a penny a week from when I was born into an endowment thing. I don't know whether it increased or what, but it matured when I was 16. That's when I left school. I left school when I was 16, and it was a few months before I could start. You'd got to pay a premium for an apprenticeship, which was £75, which was a lot of money. And that had to last you 12 months and come back to you in wages, so that the hairdresser it didn't cost her anything. She was giving your own money back, Well, there was that £75 and the £25 left over. Well, I bought to sit up and beg. Bye. And the place where I went was up Penwitham, Higher Penwitham. I think they sell glasses now, I think, that shop. Not sure. So I started cycling up there, and taking my hairdressing job up, which I absolutely loved. I absolutely loved it. But it was in those days the most unsociable thing you could ever take up, because you started at 9 o'clock and you finished God knows what time at night. Every day of the week, except Saturday sometimes, but except Sunday. So you couldn't form any relationships, really. It was just hairdressing and that, but I didn't bother about that. But that was when I started my working life. And I went from there. I stayed with her for 12 months, and then I got out of my apprenticeship. Where did I go then? Oh, Madame Grundy. On Deepdale Road, she used to do 5 bob perms. Can you imagine it? Well, that was near home. Oh, by that time we'd moved from Gladstone Street into St Stephen's Road, which was really up. As I say, my mum, she was a grand manager. God knows how she saved any money, but she did, So we bought this, my dad bought this house in Stephen's Road. Well, Mrs Grundy's was near there. Well, as I say, it was 5 bob a perm, and they used to have clubs running in mills and any workplace. And they got so many people paying so much a week, maybe a bob a week. And the time would come for them to come for the perm, And there was this other girl and I, we halved it, half the head. She stood one side, I stood the other. Oh, God, some of them were all right, some of them were full of biddies and nits. Marjorie, the other girl, she'd leave it to me and she would cut in her. Oh, God. But, we were happy. And I stayed with them. I think I was with Mrs Grundy about 5 or 6 years. She was a Jewess. God, she was a lovely woman, really, but she wanted a pound of flesh. And then I went to work at Edith's in Cannon Street. I stayed there until, oh God, I can't think how many years I was there. The war had started then, and because her husband had a shop in Bamber Bridge, hairdressers, and he'd had to lose his shop, he'd had to go, he was called up, So because of that, they let Edith put an exemption in for me until, I think it was about 18 months, that's all. And then I had to either join up, go in munitions, what have you. But when it was time for me to join up, they weren't taking them for forces or anything, so I couldn't go down to, British Aerospace, it wasn't then. What was it? English Electric, something or other. Oh, God, I was so unhappy after being in that environment, even though, sometimes at Edith's, at 8 o'clock at night, which she was supposed to close, she could book appointments for people to come at 8 o'clock and stay in, and she wasn't doing anything she shouldn't have done, just finish the hair. She used to say to me, Vera, just count them how many there are waiting, will you? Sometimes there was as many as 13, 14. Some were perms. God, we'd be going home at 1 and 2 in the morning. She used to have a taxi because she couldn't drive and Tom had been called up then. Yeah, she used to have a taxi and drive me home. And then we were there at 9 o'clock the following morning. It was a sweatshop really, but I was happy. As I say, I went down there. Oh, God, it was horrible down there. Horrible it was. No, first night when I had to go on nights, they put me on inspection because they asked me what I'd done when I was, which school had I got any certificates and that. Well, I had my maths certificate and what have you. We can put you on inspection. So I was inspecting these components that they built the plane. God knows how planes got up. They did. You had your own stamp number and you had to stamp it on, and if it crashed or anything and that number came up, it was... Well, as I say, I'd also... I'm not saying I'm the brightest person, but some of them were thick. They really were. Anyway, that was it. But we had to go on nights. I can see my dad now stood at the door, tears streaming down his face because his little girl had to go on nights. 8 o'clock at night till the 7:30 shift lot came in the morning. By 3 o'clock I was... But it was awful. I'd forget that part of my life. Only good thing was I met Harry there. But even he didn't. He didn't make up for what I was going through. No way. When we got married, we had a honeymoon in Blackpool. It was a boarding house, not a hotel. It was a boarding house, and this man that had it was a soldier with my dad in the First World War. I don't know how my dad had kept in touch with him. Anyway, he had done. And he said, well, when your Vera gets married, if she wants to come here for 2 or 3 days for a honeymoon, she can come gratis. So we grabbed at it. It was the most horrible honeymoon anybody could ever have. Harry had got, not quinces, but a very, very, very bad throat. And he was in bed with it. He was ill when he was at church, he shouldn't have been there. But anyway, he went there, and of course the war was still on. And you couldn't get drink, spirits, whiskey, or anything like that. So he went to bed, going on our honeymoon, and he went to bed straight away. Be about 6:30 at night. This fella said to me, Vera, he said, there's this pub next door. He said, they're selling rum at that pub. He said, you want to go and ask him, can you just fetch some out for Harry, to try and... Well, I suppose it was flu he had, but his throat was very bad as well. Well, I got this rum, and I made the mistake of letting people that were staying at the place see this. I tried to get him drunk for his honeymoon. Oh, God, that's the last thing I get. Anyway, he was ill all 3 days. That was our honeymoon. But we got home. We were living with my mum then, in my mum's front room. I said, Harry, I've left my yellow coat on that they had a coat stand at this boarding house. I put my coat, and it was my best, well, the only 3/4 coat I had. I said, I've left my yellow coat at now. Oh, Vera, why can't you, So he said, well, we can't afford bus fare back, 1 and 6. I said, I know, but I have no other coat. I'd maybe got a little costume coat, but I only have that one. I said, I need that, Harry. So he said, right. He said, we'll see tomorrow. If I feel any better, he said, we'll go on back. We went on bikes to Blackpool to get this bloody yellow coat. Oh, God. Anyway, we got in. That was our lovely honeymoon. But I remember thinking, I hope this is not going to be married life. But it wasn't. It improved vastly after that, I will say. I started with anemia, and I was off work for quite some time with it, really. And then the doctor said, you've not to go on nights again. He said, really, you'd be better getting out of there. So I was still liable for being called up and that. I just couldn't say, oh, well, I'm leaving that. English Electric and going back to hairdressing, that wasn't allowed. I'd had to go in some work. They put me as a civilian in Royal Army Pay Corps. And I had to go up 2 near Courtals. What is it, Red Scar now? Well, they had a thing there, and they packed batteries. They packed this straw thing. We had like bales, and we're packing these batteries for this. What would it be? Royal Engineers, wouldn't it? Well, that was a lovely job. Standing there all day. These army blokes thinking, they could boss us about because we were civilians and they were in army. Oh, they were devils with us. But we still had to do it, pack these batteries around. But we used to write little letters, little love notes, and put them in batteries, get them away. And then I got married from there when I was working there. I got married. It was winter time. I can remember it snow. It was thick, thick snow. Harry was in bed because he was on nights. I got up because I got to go up to Red Sky. And I came downstairs and the morning paper was there. Married women with men on essential work were no longer needed. They could do what they wanted, in other words, go for what job they wanted. They were exempt. Dashed back upstairs. Harry said, what's the matter? Are you not so good? I said, I'm absolutely over the moon. He said, why? I said, I can go where I want now and I'm going back hairdressing. Oh, right. Well, I better get up, had I? I said, no, you're all right. I said, it's all right, I know what I'm going to do. So I went to the Dole and I said, have you any hairdressing jobs? And they said, yes, this one. And I could go down Fishergate, and it was a Mr. Jemison, and he had a shoe shop, Clark's shoe shop. But he also had a hairdressing shop upstairs. It was there, so I went there and had to do a Marcel wave, because if anybody could Marcel wave, they could hairdress, because it was with the irons, and whatever. So I got the job. That was all right. Soon after, there was a receptionist, one who ran it, and 2 others working this place. One day the receptionist said, do you know, Vera, I think I'm pregnant. I said, oh my God, I said, well, do you not want it, Edwina? Well, no, not really, but if it's there, it's there, She was married and what have you. And we were that busy worrying about her, I didn't realise I would save myself. And that was it. I had to leave. I studied as long as I could, but I had to leave, and then I had our Chris. And that put an end to my hairdressing career till I'd had him. I was living with my mum in the front room, with no money. Harry and I We'd got married and we'd no money. Anyway, we had our Chris, and I said to my mum, will you look after Chris for me? Yeah. What you going to do? I said, well, I know there's a shop in Ribbleton Lane. I said, I'm going to see a fella that owns it, see if I can rent it and have it as a hairdressing shop. All right. What are you going to use for money? I said, well, I was hoping you and my dad would lend me some. So they lent me some. And I said it was nothing like salons they have today, you know. But I owned the shop and I did very well. Until I came to be having Jacqueline. I put kibosh on things. After I'd had Jacqueline, after a little while, I started doing it from home and that was it. I was hairdressing forevermore until I gave it up at 60. From my mum's house, when we had our Chris, well, I mean, as I say, we had no money, but we got a council house, again up Ribbleton, in Sulby Drive. There weren't houses, they're prefabs. Well, apparently, without sounding stuck up, they picked the tenants for these prefabs then, and they were nice people. They were nothing like your Brookfields and Moor Nooks and what have you like you've got now. But we went to live there. We were there 4 years maybe. And then I had our Jacqueline. I had to give up work then, even though I was going to shop every day. Before I had her, you know, I had to give up and I put somebody in the shop. I still had it, still went down, you know. But Chris went to St Maria Goretti's school and he came home one day. He was being a naughty boy, whether or not. He was playing cards on back row at school, we found out. He wasn't attending to his lessons as he should have done. He got in with this group. And he came home one day and he was effing and blinding. They'd never ever heard that in our house. Because Harry used to go pews even on television. I mean, I don't know what he'd done now. But it was something he'd never heard. So I'd made my mind up then. I went to my mum and I told her, I said, look, Mum, I said, I can't be doing with this. I said, it's the lads that are coming from Brookfield and what have you, going to that school. And it's them that's, you know, is mixing with them. So it was fair, really. I'd been to my mum's one day and I used to catch, it was a little bus that came up Thomas's Road and round by Watling Street Road, you know, to go near where we used to have to cross railway line to get into Sulby Drive. And so I said, I'm going to catch that bus that goes up Thomas's Road. So I went there. And as I was passing, there used to be Parker's Bakery in one of the side roads. And Mr. Parker lived on Thomas's Road. And there was this little notice going up in this window, Mr. Parker's window for sale. So I thought, hey, look, should I go and ask him to have a look at it? So one of my mum's sisters, Auntie Margaret, she lived in Stevens Road, just round the corner from where I was. So I went to her, I said, Mr. Parker's putting his house up for sale. I said, will you come with me, Auntie Margaret, to have a look at it? So she said, yes. So we tootled round and had a look at it, and it wanted decorating. But, I mean, to me it was marvellous, you know. So I said, well, will you not sell it? He said, I'll not sell it today, you know. When you're thinking of, I said, I'd like my husband to see it. So he said, well, when are you thinking? I said, he'll come tonight. So when Harry came home, I said, I've been looking at a house. Oh, where? I said, in Thomas's Road. Oh, how much is it? I said, I've no idea. I didn't ask him. I said, we'd come round tonight. So I said, right. So I went across to a friend of mine. Well, we'd been friends since we both moved in there together. And I said, will you look after kiddies for me? She said, why? I said, well, we want to go and look at a house. Oh, no, I'm not looking after your kids if you're going to look for a house. If you're going to leave me here, But she did. So Harry and I got our bikes out. Still my bikes. And we went down there. And he said, well, it needs a lot doing at it, Vera. I said, well, all right. Whatever needs doing at it, it's what we want. It's not what they've wanted. So he said, you'll not be satisfied, will you? I said, no, I won't. I said, I don't want Chris to grow up in that environment. I said, I want something different for my children. So, anyway, we bought it. We got a mortgage, of course. I'm not sure now. I think it was about 14,000. It was 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, toilet, and minuscule kitchen. The kitchen that we had in Sulby Drive, I mean, in all fairness, the houses were lovely. Well, you made them, but you could. But the kitchen was big. Well, this, God. Harry said, what will you do with the kitchen? Oh, it's all right, we don't live in the kitchen, everything. But anyway, we got it, and that was it. We stayed there. We were quite happy. Next door to us, this fella I'd seen coming out and getting out of a car. And I said to Harry, how he was dressed. I think he must be a salesman, a rep, Harry said, yeah, looks a bit wavy hair, He was all minister at Kerry Baptist Church. Oh, it's a good job I didn't ask him what firm he worked for. But there again, we made friends with him, and he was not like a minister, Billy Graham once came and stayed with him because he's with this Kerry Baptist, is Billy Graham. And he came over from America and he stayed with him. And I was, how are you, honey? I said to him, I hope you're listening to him, He went to the doctors and they took a blood test and they found out that he had leukemia. But both hospital and doctors and everybody else said leukemia's just one of those things, you can last a long time with leukemia. So I said to one of them, well, does he not need any medication or anything? No, he'll be all right. It's only very slight. So we left it at that. And it went on, but both Christopher and Jacqueline and myself could see him losing weight, looking very gaunt, although he still played golf. And I said to him, I think you better go back to the hospital and see what they're going to do with you. So we went back to the hospital, went back to the doctors. He sent us to the hospital. And they said, he's doing fine. I said, well, he's losing weight. To me, that's not doing fine. He's eating, but he's losing weight. Well, he's an active man, and he's getting older. In old age, you do lose weight, and which was a load of hogwash, as I thought. So anyway, we just had to leave it at that. I'll give you some tablets for him to take. I said, well, can he not take anything like leukemia? To me was like anemia. Can he not have a Guinness or a stout or anything like that to help him? Well, if he wants one, he can have one, and that's how it just was. Anyway, we left it at that, and then this particular, we always, every night had a game of crib before we went to bed. So we had this game of crib. We'd watch something on telly that we'd both split our sides laughing at. I can't remember it now, but it was a monkey, an ape, and it was its antics and that. When we had our game of crib, and he said, I fancy a couple of slices of toast with marmalade on. I said, well, all right, I'll make you supper. You can have that. So we had our supper and then went to bed. And I woke up, it was probably be about 4:30, 5 o'clock, something like that. And the light was on in the bathroom. Well, he never ever switched the light on if he just went ordinarily, So I thought, he must not be so good. So I got up. I don't know what he went to the bathroom for, whether he felt sick or what. He didn't wake me up. Went to the bathroom. There he was in the bath. He'd sat on the side but slipped in the bath. He was virtually dead, but he was still breathing, but he never regained consciousness. That was just it. I rang 999 and asked for an ambulance, and they said, "Can he not come in a taxi?" I said, "Who's going to get him out of the bath when he's unconscious?" 6'4" fella. "Oh, all right. Oh, well, we'll come then." So they did come, and they got him. I rang Chris up and I rang Jacqueline up, and they got here before the ambulance did, actually. They followed the ambulance to the hospital. And then Chris took over. He said, "Just forget it, Mum." He said, I'll see to this. So this doctor came, and he said to Chris, "There's nothing we can do for him. Really," he said, "he is dead. But we can resuscitate him. But if we resuscitate him, he's going to be sat in a chair, not being able to do a damn thing for himself." He said, "Forget that, that's not my dad," because he wasn't one of them persons, No, he said, he's dead, and that's it. We'll just wait till he finishes breathing." We just sat round the bed with him, and he died about 6 o'clock. And that was it, just stopped breathing. It was very nice for Harry. He didn't, even though he had this leukemia, he didn't suffer, it didn't impede him in any way. I'd rather him go like that, because he wasn't a man that, without being disrespectful, he didn't suffer gladly, how some enjoy being ill and that. Well, that wasn't Harry. He was, it would have been awful for him to be, just sat in a chair and not being able to do anything. And we'd had such a good night, as though it had to be. We'd had a good laugh. We had 2 games of crib, and we both won one each, and Harry said, "Well, that's how it should be." Then he had his supper, tickled off to bed, and that was it. Chris only died last year. No, he was ill. He really was. I would say for about 5 months he went through hell. That was taken just before he started being ill, that photograph. And they went to a do from work, and they always invited Chris, even though he'd retired. I don't know whether it was a Dalmini or whether it was somewhere in Blackburn. And just after that he started being ill. Being ill when, he was tired. He lost his appetite, and it just wasn't Chris. It was somebody totally different. But there again, he was like his dad. He wouldn't go to the doctors. Every Saturday, Linda and I go to Booth's shopping. Well, Chris came that particular Saturday, I don't know, but before we started shopping, we always went for a coffee, a toasted tea cake, toast, something like that. And Chris came with us, and he was sat at the table, and I could see his face. He looked like death then. He'd lost weight. And I said to Linda, "Linda, you're going to have to force him to go to the doctors. If it means fetching the doctor out to him, persevering and that." So she talked to him on the Sunday, and he must have felt ill, so he said yes, he'd go to the doctors. He went to the doctor, and he said he had glandular fever. So I said, "All right, glandular fever, what do I do for that?" Well, they did something and nothing. Gave him a few tablets, and that was it. And he gradually went down and down and down. He loved bowling, and he was in God knows how many teams. And he got that he could only go and mark, he couldn't bowl. While they go around the green marking. Then when was it? It was Adam's 21st in the August. And he came to that. We went to Tiggy's in Guildhall Street. He managed to push a few mouthfuls of something down, whatever it was. But he looked absolutely shocking. Oh, it was terrible. We had photographs taken at Adams do, but we've torn all them up that Chris was on. It was heartbreaking to see him. He'd lost weight. It just wasn't our Chris at all. Well, he died on September 23rd, and that was August the 8th. He finished up, they sent him to hospital, Royal Preston. He'd been there 6 weeks. They were pumping antibiotics in him. He wasn't eating. He wasn't sleeping. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't lay down. Couldn't get his breath when he laid down. And they said, oh, well, you'll be here 6 weeks and then we'll be sending you to Blackpool, Victoria. Why keep him 6 weeks? I do not know whether it was this antibiotic. So many things had to go in him. For what? I don't know. Because I'm afraid I was kept here. They took me to see him, but he didn't want me there to see him as he was, if you know what I mean. So anyway, it wasn't 6 weeks that he was at Royal Preston. Jacqueline and Les came one Saturday morning. And I said, good grief. I said, you look like you've been up all night, and they did. And Les said, well, we have. He said, we have been up all night. He said, we got a phone call from Linda that they're taking Chris to Blackpool Vic. During the night this was. So when Linda had told them that, Jacqueline said, well, Linda's not been on her own in Blackpool Vic. Claire Louise was there, but you need somebody a bit older, than Claire Louise. And they'd been all night with him. What they were going to do, I don't know. She said this new heart thing that they have at Blackpool Vic is absolutely wonderful. But the one thing he said, they started wiring him up, his heart and the tubes here and tubes there. And he just said, I don't want my mum to come and see me wired up like this. So Jacqueline said, well, my mum wants to come. He said, I don't care. He said, I don't want to come and see me wired up like this. She'll be worse. So, took him on the Friday night. Then they took him down to apparently do this, that and the other with him, whatever. Anyway, they arranged for him to have an operation on the Monday. And they were fetching a specialist from somewhere in London. But on the Sunday morning, he just took a turn for the worse. They took him in the theatre. They said they were going to have to open him up, and he just died. Died before he even got to the theatre. And apparently he had an abscess on his aorta that had burst. God knows why somebody hadn't. He'd had so many scans and x-rays and what have you. But they hadn't noticed that he had this abscess that had burst, and it sent septicemia right through him. And that was it. But it was all Royal Preston. They'd be frightened to death of going in there. All they could do was pump this antibiotic in him. And even what the doctors at Blackpool said, it's entirely up to you, but I would take it further. And the close ranks, when you start that, Linda did go once or twice after, and I would, say what she thought. Wouldn't bring him back. So that was him. That was his life cut short. I'd love to be able to go to the top and get on a bus, but I can't. I've got to wait till somebody comes and takes me. They're very good. They do what they can. Well, Jacqueline does. It's all fallen on her now. I just don't do anything, really. I tittle about. Dustin isn't very excited. You see, Chris used to come down twice a week at night, apart from every day during the day. But at night he used to come down and we used to have a crib. We used to play crib. But he wouldn't play. It had to be for money. I said, well, good plain crib, you know. They used to call me all sorts under the sun because I was lucky. He was a character on his own, was Chris. So I miss that sort of thing, you know. He was always down messing about in the garden, anything I wanted doing. He used to come and take me to Dobbies and garden centres and what have you. And what's that one in Broughton? Barton Grange. And then sometimes I go for a meal, such as Adam's coming home at weekend. Well, he's rung me up, he said, we'll go for a meal now, you know, somewhere. But I'm quite happy just being at home. I like to read. I like crosswords. I do books and books and books of crosswords. I have programmes that I watch on telly. Garden. I like a nice garden. Because Harry always did it nice, you know. I like to be able to look round and just walk round the garden with me, helping my friend there. But I can't do anything really that I want to do. If I want a lipstick, I say, then can you get me a lipstick or something, you know, that you know I like? Well, I'd love to be able to go and get that myself. But I can't. I mean, if they take me in town, I have to be in a chair because I can't walk that far. But I'm luckier than a lot. They're very good with me. But there's not a lot really I can do. After Harry died, I wasn't as bad as I am now physically. For a couple of years, maybe 3 years, I had 2 or 3 weekends away in either Blackpool or Lytham. Well, they used to take me and put me in these hotels, and then they stayed at night. Just over a weekend, you know, for a break. I used to go to Margaret's every Monday, and we used to go to Lytham. Just have a walk round Lytham, but all that's gone by the board now. I can't do that. So, life's quiet and I have some, but at my age, you can't expect a lot, can you? You can't do karaoke every night. But I'm quite happy.
Vera Thompson was interviewed by Ken Moss on the 25th of June and 2nd of July 2008 in Lostock Hall, Lancashire. Music was performed by the Grimethorpe Colliery Band, with additional music from The Century Speaks by BBC Radio Lancashire. The programme was produced by Maverick Productions.